Hello, is this thing on? Yeah, I think it is. And good morning, folks. I am your host, Kennedy Hansen, and this is our podcast, After the Mic Drops. Today's episode is going to be about Tim Buckley, a famous music artist that is pretty underground that a lot of people haven't really heard of. He died in 1975, and he mostly did a lot of jazz and rock. Hope you enjoy to stay and tune in to his early childhood, a little bit of his immediate family, and we'll also be getting into his discography, some of his albums, and how he died. So stay to listen. He was born as Timothy Charles Buckley III on February 14th of 1947, and he was born to his parents of Elaine and Timothy Charles Buckley Jr. His dad was a World War II veteran and also an immigrant of the Irish. He spent his early childhood in Amsterdam, New York, about 40 miles from northwest of Albany. At 5 years old, Buckley began to start listening to some of his mother's music, which was mostly related to jazz, particularly Miles Davis. Buckley first started getting more into music in 1956 when they moved to Southern California, where his grandmother proceeded to introduce him to works like Bessie Smith and Billie Holiday. His mother introduced him to more of a jazz kind of category like Frank Sinatra, and his dad was more into the country scene like Johnny Cash. There was a music revolution in the 1960s, and Buckley taught himself how to play the banjo at 13. But he did have a injury that caused him to hurt his hand, and he couldn't really play bar chords, considering that he had permanently damaged 2 fingers at a football game, which is very interesting to say the least, because if you've ever listened to any of his music or wanting to, he has very beautiful guitar instrumentals. Tim's music career took off pretty fast because just at 19, he released his self-titled debut album in 1966. He wasn't really content staying in one genre, so he proceeded to push further and further into different types of music to try and widen his variety so everybody would want to listen to it. His second album, Goodbye and Hello, from 1967, it was lush, experimental, and it showcased a lot of his maturity and growth as a singer and a musician. Okay, so by the late 60s, Tim started to incorporate more of a jazz kind of tone and influences into his work, and his albums like Happy Sad from 1969 and Lorca from 1970 were raw, inspirational, and he had a lot of vocals. He was mostly known for his 5-octave vocal range, and his music proceeded to take a lot of, and he was not afraid to take risks, and he used his voice as an instrument, really showcasing and showing off that range, and he used a lot of growling, whispering. He just wanted to showcase how good of a singer he was, and that really worked out in his favor for him. Okay, so as we're talking about 1960s around here, he met Mary Gilbert in 1964. Their relationship, inspired a lot of his music, and they dated for about a year when they were then married on October 25th of 1969. When Mary became pregnant, Buckley decided to abandon her and their unborn child. The couple then divorced in October of 1966, a month before their biological son, Jeff Buckley, was born. A little messed up on his part. I mean, yes, he wanted to expand his music and he wanted to focus on his career, but leaving a pregnant woman is not okay in any circumstance. But, the past is done. It's not, and he's dead. It's not like we can, give him too much crap about it. But later, in April of 1970, Tim did marry Judy Brajot Sutcliffe in Santa Monica, and he proceeded to adopt her son, Taylor Keith Sutcliffe. Not too much information about him. He's kind of wiped off the internet, which is really good for him. Glad he stayed out of the spotlight and he's not associated with Tim or Jeff, and that he got to have his own personal life. I hope he's still living a good one. Okay, next we're going to start talking to some of his albums. Okay, so, we have a release in October of 1969 titled Tim Buckley. That was his debut album that, got him started as a singer and a musician. Then we move on to his second album, as I was talking about earlier, Goodbye and Hello. It was released August of 1967. It did hit peak charts, actually, and it was 171 on the charts, which is pretty impressive for his second album. Then we have his third album, which was Happy Sad. That was his improv, kind of jazz, kind of took a turn. Happy Sad, released April of 1969. That was his best album, reaching at 81 on the Billboard. Then we have Blue Afternoon, that hit 192, released October of 1969. So only a few months later after Happy Sad. Then we have Lorca, which was June 70. It did not hit any of the Billboard. Then we have Star Sailor, November 70, did not hit anything. Greetings from LA, Sophronia, and Look at the Fool, released in 1974. Well, as of June 28th, Tim went on a short tour and proceeded to play in Dallas and played a sold-out crowd of 1,800 people. He then went to celebrate the end of the tour of a weekend of drinking with his band and his friend mates. But on the evening of June 29th, he was hanging out with his long-term friend, Richard Keeling, who then proceeded to pull out a bag of heroin, which both of the men decided to then, quote-unquote, snort. Buckley's friend took him home, and his second wife, Judy, who he was still currently married to at this point in time, was worried. She proceeded to lay him down in bed. When checking on him later, he was unconscious and dead, turning a slight bit of blue. After some friends and some paramedics proceeded to try and save him, their attempts failed and he died. It states, the coroner's report stated that Buckley died at 19:42 p.m. on June 29th of 1975 from heroin, morphine, and alcohol, all ingested of an overdose. So the man was only 28 years old when he died, and it was right after, he had the biggest concert of his life, and it is very sad to see such a young artist go so sadly, especially with his career just starting to take off. He was starting to get that recognition that he deserved, and it was really sad that his life was cut short, but it was under his own consequences. So we're going to be sidetracking off just a little bit here. We're going to go back to a little bit of his discography. So in his song Star Sailor, he released a song called Song to the Siren. So the backstory behind this was, it was based off of Greek mythology. It was this really beautiful acoustic guitar song, and it really expressed his emotional and raw vocals, and it's very in depth, and you can totally relate to this. It was just a beautifully sung and played song, to be completely honest with you, from my personal perspective. Okay, we're going to be getting a little sidetracked here. But in his album Star Sailor, it was more of a, like a folk, a kind of rock kind of thing. He has his number one song, which was called Song to the Siren. So the backstory behind this that we know of is from Greek mythology. He's literally talking about sirens. But to quote the very last verse, he says, swim to me, let me unfold you, here I am, waiting for you. Now I want you to keep that in mind for next episode when we go back and we talk about his biological son, Jeff Buckley. But it's just a very interesting concept that his number one song was about this, not any of his other stuff about like his first wife or anything. It's just very interesting to me that was the number one, but it does have a beautiful instrumental, and I can definitely see why a lot of people would like it. But, Tim, he never achieved huge commercial success, but he did influence lots of different generations of artists who value the authenticity and the creativity over popularity. And it's just very interesting. Like, he left 9 studio albums in just 9 years. And then his more famous son, Jeff Buckley, you might have heard of him more than you have Tim. But You know, it is tragic that he passed away young, but it's also very inspiring and something that you can compare to your own life. Watching him only have such a short amount of time, but he did so much with it. And that's really just a reminder that we need to keep putting ourselves out there, and we need to do more with our lives, do what we love, because you never know when that's going to end. And Tim did exactly that. Yes, he had some struggles, but eventually he made something of himself. Yes, it was only like one concert in Dallas, but he still did that with hard work, honesty, and putting himself out there in the musical way that he's always wanted to. So, if this did not convince you to go listen to Tim Buckley, I don't know what else would. I would 100% recommend Song to the Siren. Beautiful, unforgettable classic. And thank you for joining me on this episode. And I'd love for you to subscribe and come back next week. We will be uploading once a week. Thank you. Most episodes will be out by Wednesday, so look out for that. And we will catch you in our next episode about Jeff Buckley, his son. Thank you, and have a wonderful night. And as always, that's what happened after the mic dropped.